Good morning. We are now in phase the 7th of Hardy's classic novel, Tess of the D'Urbervilles. And he entitles it Fulfillment, which is appropriate because earlier in the novel, after Tess was raped by, or after Alec raped Tess, Hardy said her people would have said, "It was to be." And that's what fulfillment means. What happens next is what's meant to happen. And fate has a huge hand in it. We're in chapter 53, and we are at Emminster Vicarage. And we are looking at two older people, Mr. and Mrs. Clare. And they are ridden with anxiety and stress because Angel's going to come home. And they're waiting for him. And that's all they can do is wait in their anxiety and their stress. And when he reaches home, he's almost unrecognizable. "Oh, it is not my angel, not my son," his mother cries. She cried in all the irony of sorrow. His father is shocked to see him. Angel looks like a skeleton. The malaria has really drained him. And his eyes are sightless. But he does say this, "I was ill over there. I am all right now." And we have to ask, is he all right now? Will he see Tess's worth? Well, I think maybe he has. Will he accept her? Maybe he will. But it's taken a long time and a lot of agony. They give him the letters Tess wrote, and Hardy, the master of fate, has him read them in reverse order. The short, angry one first, and then backwards. And suddenly, he says, "It is quite true. She will never be reconciled to me." Well, after what you did to her, she shouldn't be. And he realizes that he thinks, I'll see her, she'll run into my arms and everything will be okay. And he realizes it's not going to be so easy after all. Would it be wise even to confront her? So he decides to write a letter to Tess's mother to prepare her for his appearance. And her mother comes back with, "My daughter is away from me at present." Joan is finally acting somewhat like a mother by shielding her daughter from this man. He asks himself a good question. He had asked himself, why had he not judged Tess constructively rather than biographically, by the will rather than by the deed? Then he reads her letter from Flintcomb-Ash, and it hurts him, and he begins to cry. He's blinded by tears. Asks his father, "Did she ever ask for the money I left for her?" And his father says, "No, she never did," because Tess had too much pride and too much dignity to take anything from him. And so he decides he's going to have to go find Tess. It's going to be difficult. He doesn't have a cell phone. He doesn't have global positioning systems. He doesn't have anything electronic to do it. He's going to have to do it by traveling and guessing. We're at chapter 54. Goes to the local inn, hires a small trap, a small wagon, two-wheeled wagon pulled by a horse, and takes off. Passes cross in hand. Where a murder or a whipping or a crucifixion was committed, we're not sure. And it's not so easy to find her. He goes to Flintcomb-Ash, asks around. Nobody's heard of a Mrs. Clare. Tess and Marion are gone. She's remembered well, though, by her Christian name, and they point him to her hometown. And so he goes to Marlett. And he finds her house newly occupied by new tenants who have no idea where she's gone. And then he goes to the local church and he talks to the local parson. And we've met this parson before. This is the man who refused Tess burial of her dead child in the local churchyard. And the parson takes him to see Jack Durbeyfield's grave. And there is a headstone, and on it are carved these words: "How are the mighty fallen." How are the mighty fallen? Well, that's what the parson at the beginning of the novel said to Jack Durbeyfield. How are the mighty fallen? Because the D'Urbervilles have come down in the world. And that's what started this whole mess. Jack Durbeyfield was so broke he couldn't pay for his own grave digging, his own headstone or the carving on it, so Angel pays for it. And then he heads off and gets to Kingsbere and finds Joan. And oddly enough, she's a handsome woman, dressed respectably, and he doesn't understand. He's now meeting his mother-in-law, and so asks her, where is she? And Joan is concealing and evasive. She've not come home. Where is she staying? One of the little kids walks up beside the mother and says, is this the gentleman who's going to marry Tess? And Joan says, he has married her. And so he can't get much out of Joan, but he says something significant. I have never really known her. And he's right, he never really has known Tess. He had his view of her, the simple dairymaid. Joan's pretty well off now, but she does reveal, and he says this, look, he says, please tell me, in kindness to a lonely, wretched man. So she tells him he's at Sanborn. Tess is at Sanborn. How did Joan get so well off? Well, yeah, like D'Urberville paid for the house, put her up there, gave her a nice place to live, just like he said he would. Chapter 55. Angel reaches Sanborn, and Hardy describes the place. And he describes it as a new resort town by the sea, near the Edgden Waste, and near it is a forest that's almost prehistoric. So again, Hardy is juxtaposing the old and the new and pointing out that the old is going to pass away. More houses are going to be built, the forest will be carved up for wood, and that's how it's going to go. He sees the houses, they're large, look like wealthy people live here, and he assumes that Tess is here as a servant because that's how he views her, the servant dairymaid girl. He has difficulty finding her until he goes to the post office, and the mailmen know who lives in town because people are constantly coming and going. You know, they rent a place for a month and they leave, but he says, yeah, she lives on this street. They give him directions and he goes there. So here he is. I don't know how much sympathy we have for him. He's stressed. You could say his guts are hanging out of his mouth. But here he is approaching the house, and he rings the doorbell. And the woman, a Mrs. Brooks, is the servant, answers it, and he tells her, well, is Mrs. Clare here? Tell her that Angel is here to see her. That's my Christian name. And he realizes Tess's position is not what he thought it was. She must have somehow claimed and sold the jewels. Doesn't blame her. And Tess appears. And there's no doubt about it. Now, her beauty is even more evident. It is as much evident as it was on the night of their wedding when she sat at the table with the jewels on and the earrings on, and I said she's just missing a tiara to look like a queen. But he holds out his arms, and she does not rush into his arms. And she says, can you forgive me? He says, can you forgive me? He says, for going away. And she says, it's too late. I did not see you as you were. I do now, Tessie mine. Don't come close to me, she says. Don't you love me because I've been so pulled down by illness? Well, okay. You've been pulled down by illness. You've suffered. How about how she suffered? Freezing out there in Flint Camash, chopping those turnips, putting up with the sexual harassment of Farmer Groby, and all the other stuff she's endured, sleeping outdoors on a bed of leaves because you rejected her. Why should we have sympathy for you? She suffered more than you have. You brought your suffering on yourself. And explains that I wrote to you, I waited, but you didn't come. And now this man, Alec, has won me back to him. He's been very good to me. But I hate him now because he lied. He said you wouldn't come again. But she tells him to go away and don't come back. Ah, it is my fault. And here we say, finally, somebody besides Tess blames himself for something. And justifiably so. He created this mess. We're now in chapter 56. Mrs. Brooks is the servant who answered the door. She's not of an unusually curious mind. She's used to renting out this house and its parts to well-paying tenants. She can hear a conversation upstairs. It's somewhat loud, so she goes up the stairs quietly and looks through the keyhole. What can she see? Well, she sees a note of moaning and a heavy sigh and she sees Tess with her hands clasped over her head. And the man says, "What's the matter?" And Tess's speech to Alec: "And you used your cruel persuasion upon me, my little sisters and brothers, and my mother's needs. They were things you moved me by, and you said my husband would never come back. I believed you and gave way. He's gone a second time, and I've lost him now forever. He will not love me." And Mrs. Brooks can see the pain on Tess's face. "And he is dying. And my sin kill him and not kill me. You have torn my life to pieces. I cannot bear this. I cannot." This is Tess talking to Alec. Mrs. Brooks goes back downstairs and starts eating her breakfast again. Then she hears a creaking of the floorboards, and then she sees Tess come down the stairs. She's dressed immaculately. Come down the stairs and head out the front door. Mrs. Brooks is puzzled, so she waits. While she's eating her breakfast, she looks up at the ceiling. There's a red spot on the ceiling, and it's expanding. She doesn't know what it is. So she gets up on the table and touches the ceiling with her fingers, takes a look at him, and realizes it's blood. And it's dripping. She goes out to get a man and tells him to come in. Yes, he verifies that's blood. They open the door of the drawing room, and there's Alec. It's likely Tess slit his throat if he's bleeding this much this fast. And the news of this spreads very quickly. We will now finish the novel in the next segment.